Welcome to Horse Matchmakers, a podcast made to help first-time horse buyers navigate the horse buying process with confidence. We cover everything from what you need in a horse to understanding what ads are really saying, everyday scams to perfect prospects, so you can match with the right horse for you. You may be wondering why this podcast is necessary. It is because it's something we will cover in every single episode. People lie. It makes sense seeing as the horse market is a multi-million-dollar industry. People lie to get a quick buck. For example, I once bought a 10-year-old dead broke horse. I did not go and see this horse, which is the first mistake you can make in a horse buying process. You always want to go see the horse, even if that means you're traveling 4, 5, 6 hours. If it's too far for you to travel, you don't need that horse. When the horse arrived, he looked nothing like his photos. We accepted him anyways, but honestly, this is where you should send him back. That was another mistake we made. 2 weeks later, we went to put the first ride on him. He proved to be an absolute lunatic. On the second ride, he was the exact same. We tried everything to make it work before eventually taking him to the vet and finding out he had kissing spine, arthritis, and many more issues, which was not disclosed in the sales ad. I hear a lot of stories very similar to the one that I personally experienced, and it's because of some big mistakes that you're making within the horse buying process that would have shown you those red flags before the horse arrived at your home, before you handed over the check. So with all that being said, let's hop into the first topic of the Horse Matchmaker podcast, whether or not you are ready for your first horse. This first subject is really simple to cross off for a few different people. You are ready if you already own a horse, you lease a horse and it stays at your place, you lease a horse and it stays at a boarding barn, and you'll keep your new horse at a boarding barn. You're ready because you're already taking care of a horse. However, this next section of the podcast will still be useful to you because you can always alter course and go back and learn the skills you need to properly take care of a horse, even if you already have one. Now that the people who are already ready are out of the way, let's get into what you need to do for you to be ready for your first horse. The first thing you need to do is have been riding for a year or more. If not, I would wait until you reach this milestone. What is a better reward than getting a horse for reaching such an achievement? If you have, you can move on to the second thing we need to do. Has your trainer or someone other than yourself with more horse experience said you were ready? This can be embarrassing to ask, but it's a very important one too. If your trainer says no, then ask where your weak points are so you can learn the skills you need to know. If your trainer says yes, then time for the next skill. Do you have any other skills other than just riding horse? For example, can you muck a stall, feed a horse, lunge a horse, tell if a horse is injured or sick, groom, saddle, etc. and so forth? If you can't do any of the skills I just mentioned, ask your trainer for help so you can learn them. The fourth qualifier is a rough one, but also incredibly important. Can you actually afford a horse? A lot of people don't think about the expenses that it takes over time for a horse. It's not just one upfront one to purchase one. There's lots of little ones that are hidden throughout every single day. Do some research into what caring for a horse would mean for you in your area, the expense behind that, and decide whether or not that's a responsibility you can take on at this time. Remember, none of these things mean no forever. It always means that you just need to wait a minute to learn the skills, to save up the money, to put yourself in a situation where you can do this, instead of just jumping in ill-prepared and either getting yourself hurt, get a horse hurt, or just be unable to afford and lead up to heartbreak later because an issue happens. The last qualifier is actually one that's also very, very important, but there's ways around it. Can you legally own a horse on your land? This is where you quickly check your laws because it is very important to make sure you have the correct amount of acreage. For example, in Texas, you have to have a certain amount of acreage per horse that you own. So, if you cannot have horses on your land, you need to check out the boarding barns inside of your area and return back to the budget question to figure out whether or not you can currently afford a horse. If not, then again, just wait till you can. It will happen eventually, you just have to give it a bit of time. If you passed all those qualifications you need to have for a horse, then it's time to start looking for your first match. Moving on to the next segment, what you need for your horse, or what you need to have planned for your horse. These are all items you don't need day of arrival, but you need to have plans to either get them soon afterwards, or know what you're going to do if a situation arises. First is simple. You need a farrier. Do your research. Find one that fits your budget and serves your area. Typically, boarding barns have an on-hand farrier, so when picking one, ask about it. If you're keeping a horse on your own land, you're going to have to find one by yourself. Typically, horses need to be trimmed every 5 to 6 weeks. Make sure you have a farrier before it becomes time for your horse's trim. You also need to have a feed plan planned. Normally, you feed whatever the previous owner fed for about 2 weeks before shifting them over to whatever diet you want. I'm a huge believer in the all-forage diet, so that is what I switch all of my horses over to. I highly recommend it. However, you should do your own research and come to your own conclusions about what diet your horse should be on. A few tips are that unless your horse is running races every single weekend and getting worked out 5 days a week, I do mean worked out too, not just walking around an arena, you do not own a high-performance horse. They don't need a high-performance feed. Think about the level of work this horse will need when you're deciding your diet. Now, the next thing is a conditioning plan. What are your plans for this horse? Make sure they're conditioned for it. This heavily relies on how much work the horse was getting before as well. If you're buying a horse that has been out to pasture for the last year, then make sure you're giving them time to build up to running a barrel race. Think of it this way. If you haven't trained for a marathon and I asked you to go run it right now, no warning, do you think you could do it? Creating a conditioning plan is very important because even when being asked to run a 5K is a lot if you haven't even picked up a speed walk in a year. The final section is what you need to have for your horses on day of arrival. I'm going to start with simple, absolutely needed items and then move on to the less important, but still needed. The first one is shelter. This one ranges wildly. If you are keeping the horse on your own land, make sure they have rain protection in some way, as well as good fencing. If you are not, then find a boarding barn, make sure it's one that matches with you, budget, personality, level of care, etc. If you want full care boarding, that is naturally more expensive than non-full care, though it's a nice option for those who don't have time for the day-to-day care. Find the option that is best for you and have it ready for day of arrival. You also need a form of water, whether that is containers for you to manually lug water to the horse or a hose. Again, a boarding barn normally makes this void. However, I would double check about it. Next up is the basic tack, which is a halter and a lead rope. To ride, you need the rest: a saddle, blanket, bridle, or whatever the horse uses, reins, etc. These can be expensive, but I always recommend bonding with a horse for 2 weeks before putting your first ride on. You still want to work with them, so if that's hand walks or lunging, because a horse that just sits is not a good ride typically, but for day of arrival, you just need the basic halter and a lead rope. You also need the basic feeding tools, whatever feed the previous owner fed, a feed bucket, and a feed pan. You will want to feed whatever the previous owner fed for 2 weeks, then switch over to your chosen feed. You also need hay and a hay bag. A hay bag is on the side of not super needed for day of arrival, but will save you money in the long run, as a horse wastes less hay with one. Another item to have on hand is a first aid kit. Some basic items to have in it is coliques or Banamine, bandages, tick remover, a small book with any information on the horse to give to the vet, lung's emergency number for the vet, and a spray-on bandage. The rest will come to you with vet visits in time. My personal first aid kit is huge. Eventually you'll want stuff at home to treat all of these ailments. Choke, colic, small cut, eye issues, saddle sores, bug bites, ticks, something to cleanse wounds, hoof issues. For many of these, you can treat at home. However, if you're unsure about anything, call a vet. Colic, choke, eye issues, and large cuts are a vet call immediately. Find out if travel vets are in your area or if you have to haul to a vet. If you have to haul, you will also need a trailer within the first week or so. It may seem like a lot to have all that on hand. However, I have experience where this is important. On the second day after purchasing a horse, my first ever horse, they jumped a fence and had a large cut on the inside of their leg. Thankfully, we were at a boarding barn at the time and they had caught the horse and called the vet. If we weren't, we would not have been able to help him. We didn't know any vets, didn't have a first aid kit, nothing. So having a basic first aid kit is very important. The last thing you need for a day of arrival is excitement. All of this is for a very, very happy reason. You're beginning the next part of your equine journey. It'll be a lot of work, but can be the most rewarding. So sit back, relax, and tune in next week for the 3 questions you should ask before messaging a seller. What horse do you need? What is the horse? And who is this horse?